Hello everyone, it's Miss Wills again. We're going to be continuing with the An Inspector Calls lessons, and over the next two lessons where focus will be on how to answer an essay question on Mr Birling and essentially giving it a go. So before we start, as always, green text boxes are tasks you must complete and the red text boxes are challenge tasks I'd like you to have a go at. Now, your lesson objectives for this lesson and the aims of the lesson is for you to familiarise yourself with the assessment objectives for a response to an inspector calls. So really understanding what the examiner is looking for and to plan a response to the exam question, how does Priestley present Mr Birling in An Inspector Calls? So this is the question that we will be focusing on over the next couple of lessons. And the page in your booklet you will need to turn to for this lesson is page 48. So the first task I would like you to carry out. So at the top of this slide, you have, of course, the question that I want you to focus on over the next couple of lessons. How does Priestley present Mr Birling in Inspector Calls? The initial thing I'd like you to do is just to come up with 4 points of your own, 4 points in response to this question. So how Priestley presents Mr Birling. So focusing on Mr Birling's character, use your notes if you need to, because you will have plenty on Mr Birling by now. And then I would like you to try and challenge yourself and think of any quotations that you could use to support your points. Could you come up with a quotation for each point that you could perhaps remember, or you can use your notes as well to help you with that? So I would like you to pause this clip for me, please, to give that a go. Okay, hopefully you've managed to give that a go. We are going to be moving on to the next slide here and look at what makes a good response, what an examiner is actually looking for when they're marking your An Inspector Calls responses. Now, for the actual content of your response, the examiner is looking at 3 assessment objectives. Okay, so the first of which being that you've made a clear point about the text. It's kind of like the P in the PEE paragraphs. You've made your point, it's clear, the examiner can see you understand what's happening in the text, but not only that, that the point you make answers the question as well. And then that you support your point with quotations and moments from the text, key moments and quotations that you will obviously need to remember as you're revising as well to help you. So the second assessment objective is, now you've got your quotation, now you've got your evidence or your moment, you need to analyse that. You need to zoom in on language choices, talk about the significance of form and structure as well. And when you are analysing, make sure you're using the correct terminology. What word types have been used here? What dramatic devices have been used here by Priestley that you've been introduced to while you've been studying the Inspector Calls, like dramatic irony, like stage directions. And then, of course, we need to discuss what is Priestley's purpose here through the use of this language. What meaning does he convey to an audience? But you need to always remember that with a play, there is an audience watching this. So how do they respond? What kind of response are we expecting from an audience there as well? And then finally, AO3 is linking your ideas to social and historical context. So what is happening at the time, and just ideas and key ideas and themes as well, like responsibility. And when we're talking about key ideas, it's kind of key ideas at the time, perhaps when Priestley was writing and what he was trying to convey and highlight. For example, the contrast between capitalism and socialism as well. So that is essentially what you'll be assessed on when the examiner is marking your response. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a go at planning a response to the question, bearing in mind that we need to make sure we hit all of these assessment objectives as well. Now, what you will have in your booklet is you will have a table that looks like this. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking first of all at this first planned paragraph here. We're going to go through it together as a class, and then for the other 3 points, I will need you to plan that yourselves. Okay, so that's how it's going to work today. So we're going to start off with this point here. So each of these rows are essentially a paragraph. So start with this one at the top, and then it's over to you to complete the rest. So starting with the top one here, you will see it's sectioned off in point, quotation, analysis, social historical context, and Priestley's purpose. So this is just making sure that when you're planning, you are hitting all the assessment objectives. Now these first two boxes here, of course, will be for assessment objective 1. So it's making sure you made a clear point and that you've used a quotation or evidence from the text to support it. So our point here is at the beginning of the play, Mr Birling is presented as an arrogant man, someone who likes the sound of his own voice, and someone who believes he is right about everything. So it's pretty straightforward, pretty clear point. The quotation that's been used here is just let me finish, Eric, you've a lot to learn yet. So there we've got our point and there we've got our quotation. So it's as simple as that for that section there. But of course, then we need to move on to the analysis part of the paragraph, which is going to make up a big chunk of the paragraph as well. Now here we have the start of analysis in this box. So Mr Birling does not let his son speak, perhaps because he thinks Eric is too naive. The verb learn suggests. So there we've got the start of analysis. And what we're going to be doing in a moment is we're going to be going through some key ideas of what we could put in this box to complete it. And you are going to try and complete that for your plan for next lesson as well. But before we do that, we need to think about when we're being asked to analyse a quote, what kind of things do we actually need to do with it? So what I have on this next slide here is just some steps for analysing quotations that you could use and go through when you're planning your own responses. So please either get these steps, write them down in your notes, or take a photograph of it so you have this. So of course, write your quotation down first of all. Then below it, you need to think of two statements about what it suggests, okay? So your quotation, you need to think of not just one thing, but could it suggest something else as well? And that's when you're really going to impress the examiner. Then highlight the key terms and label them correctly. So the key words you're zooming in on, you've talked about, overall what's happening, an overall statement of what's happening in that quote, but now we zoom in on it a little bit more for step 3. Highlight the terms. Can you label the terminology correctly or the devices that have been used by Priestley? And then add notes about what those words show. Remember a link back to the question as well. So really what you need to be thinking about here, guys, is the examiner is not looking for you to feature spot. To be able to say dramatic irony has been used, to be able to say that imperative sentence has been used is all very well and good, but you will not get the marks for that if you don't explain the impact of it, why it's being used, and what it conveys about that character. And then finally, are there any other words you could highlight? So try and highlight more than one word so that you've got a lot to say about that quotation as well. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment. So here is an example. So this is the quote that we've been given for this first point here. I would like you for step 1 just to write 2 statements underneath this quote. So write this quote down somewhere in your notes and underneath it write 2 statements about what this suggests about Mr. Birling's character. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to do that. If you could please pause the recording. Okay, hopefully you've managed to give that a go, and I'm going to put my ideas up on the next slide here. You can get these down as well if you like. So I said, Mr. Birling does not let Eric speak because he thinks he is too naive. This may suggest there are tensions in their relationship. It also suggests that Mr. Birling is extremely arrogant and won't let other voices be heard above his. So these are the 2 kind of statements I've decided to get down about this quotation. So the next step is to highlight key terms and label them correctly. So what I would like you to do is I'd like you to have a little read of this quote again and think about which words would you highlight, would you zoom in on here. And I'd like you to highlight those for me, and if you can, label them for the word type they are, or if any dramatic devices have been used in this quote whatsoever. So if you could just pause this clip and give that a go for me, please. Okay, so I'll get up on the slide here the words that I have highlighted. So firstly, this entire sentence here, just let me finish Eric. I've kind of highlighted because I think it's really important. This is Mr. Birling giving Eric a command here. And another word for a sentence that is a command or phrase that is a command is an imperative. Okay, so you may know that already, you may not. You might want to put that down in your notes. So imperative sentence is basically a command sentence. And of course, Mr. Birling is giving Eric a command here. I also would highlight this idea, this use of the personal pronoun me, because again, it's emphasizing this idea that Mr. Birling is all about the self, which kind of coincides with his capitalistic views as well. And the verb learn. Now, if you can, when you just pick out a word and you think, oh, well, there's no device being used here, I just want to talk about this word, that is fine, that is great, you can. But if you can think about what type of word it is and write that down as well, that is even better. So, of course, learn is a verb. So now that we have those highlighted and that we have got the correct terms down, I would like you to think about the next step and just write down under each of those, what is the significance of the use of these techniques or these words? And I would like you to write down what it tells us about Mr. Birling. So if you can, please pause this and give that a go. Okay, hopefully you've managed to get some ideas down there. I'll just go through a few of my ideas which you can add to your notes if you like. So focusing first on this imperative sentence here, so this command sentence, what I kind of put is this suggests that Mr. Birling is very authoritative and likes to be in charge. He likes to have control over everybody else in the room. But it's also ironic as he always interrupts Eric. So I've kind of looked at there are a few things I could say. Yes, it shows he wants control, but really, you know, he's saying how Eric's interrupted him, but so far that's all he's done with other people. So there is a sense of irony there, of course. Moving on to personal pronoun, I've said it suggests that Mr. Birling is very self-centered as a person, as he's always focused on himself. He only cares about his own voice and nobody else's. And then finally, for the term and the verb learn, I have put this verb demonstrates how condescending Mr. Birling is towards his son and others. He believes he's always right, but ironically, he's the one that comes across as ill-educated. So we have a man here who is telling his son has a lot to learn, as if he knows everything, essentially. But we know that that's not the case, because he talks about how there isn't going to be a war and how the Titanic is unsinkable. So you could draw in those kind of ideas as well. Okay, guys, so that's just me going through there quickly the steps of analysis and what you can do with a quote once you have it in terms of zooming in on it as well. So what I'd like you to do is, after going through that quote, I would just like you to finish this sentence in this box here with one or more ideas that we've talked about there, just so you've got that for next lesson. So I'd just like you to pause this and complete that for me. Okay, fantastic. So what we're going to move on to looking at next in the next box is the AO3 side of your paragraph. Okay, so this is where you're looking at social, historical context, but also context as a whole. What key ideas are being highlighted here? Are there any themes that you could link in with this quote and this moment? So what I would like you to do for me first was, I just want you to give this a go yourself. So we've got a sentence out here. At the time, business owner like Mr. Birling. What do we know about men like him at the time? How does this link in to this idea of him being arrogant and the kind of ideas that Priestley was trying to convey and try to highlight? Now, I'm going to have to stop this clip here. So the second half of this lesson will be on the next clip, guys. So if you could please just take a moment to finish that sentence first, and then we'll pick up on the next recording. Thank you very much for listening.